Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description.
Once upon a time, there lived a cat named Tora-chan. She enjoyed high status, being the favorite of the daimyo's wife herself. But unfortunately, this proud descendant of powerful ninja cats couldn't live the quiet, well-fed life of pampered aristocrats. She craved freedom, excitement, and thrilling chases and battles. Her solution was regular forays into the village with the curious humans who harnessed the energy within their bodies. They were different from the inhabitants of the daimyo's palace, powerful enough to defeat her, the great Tora-sama. The ninja cat wasn't above learning interesting techniques from the shinobi who captured her. Despite the furry kunoichi's love of battle and adrenaline, she loved children just as much. Cat children and human children were all the same. For her, there was no difference between them, hers, and others. They were all someone's children. Every cub must be fed, petted, and raised. And then one day, while strolling through the evening streets of List, the cat came across an unpleasant sight. In the tall grass, on the outskirts of the village, far from the last houses, a human cub meowed pitifully. The blond boy smelled strangely of animal, and was subtly different from those around him. Tora had encountered him before, but hadn't paid much attention. The nimble cub was always in a hurry. Unable to resist the animal instinct to protect her offspring, Tora leaped resolutely from the tree branch. The child clumsily licked his scraped elbows and bruised knuckles. She nudged the whining cub in the side with her large head and busily sniffed the wounds. They didn't seem serious. Blue eyes stared in surprise at the sudden assistant. "Huh? What are you doing here, Nico-chan?" The cat ignored the cub's confusion, licking the dried blood from the scratch on his shoulder with her rough tongue. She sensed the other's pain and resentment, which gave way to a timid, quiet joy with her arrival. Thora was a smart cat and understood a lot, though she couldn't speak. Before her stood a cub, deprived of affection, lacking true care, with a piercing melancholy in the depths of his bottomless eyes. Reaching up to his face, she licked his wet cheeks with their unusual animal whiskers, insistently rubbing her broad forehead against his chin. "What's wrong, Nico-chan?" the boy asked, still confused, with a wide smile. The cat rattled with satisfaction, feeling the dark storm inside the cub subside. "You came to calm me down, right, Dadabeo?" he suggested, stroking Toru's strong back. For some reason, the pets were wary of the blonde and didn't want to stay with him, no matter how much he tried, but this cat came up to him and tried to help, which was doubly surprising. And unlike the others, she knew how to pity him in a way that didn't hurt. "Thank you. At least you don't despise me." Tora looked at the cub with her intelligent amber eyes, listening to the residual clots of indignation escaping him. An uncontrollable torrent of pure emotion poured from the little man, something the Naniko understood especially well. Can you imagine? I so wanted to go to that festival. They were putting on a show in the square and handing out free lollipops. But that idiot Tobio and his friends picked on me. He said that a monster and scum like me had no place among people. I could have put up with that, Dadabeo. I've been called worse. But that jerk said that my parents abandoned me, and that's probably why they also, from HHH, the boy stuttered, unable to even speak ill of his parents like that. And then I couldn't take it anymore and punched Tobio in the face. Heh, I definitely broke his nose. But those cowards attacked in a crowd? Treacherous tears began to choke him. Tora meowed encouragingly, climbing onto the child's lap. The boy wrapped his arms around the animal, pressing it to his powerful, bony chest. Tora noted with displeasure the excessive thinness of her new charge. She didn't know everything about humans, but her knowledge was enough to identify developmental abnormalities. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Nico-chan, will you be my friend?" the boy suddenly asked, clenching his fists with a kind of morbid hope. The cat only purred louder, offering her ear to be scratched. The child smiled happily and seemed to turn golden, realizing that this meant yes. When the cub calmed down again and stroked the cat's brown fur, the furry kunoichi firmly decided to take care of the little one. Too small and vulnerable to be independent in the cat's sense of the word, the incomparable Tora-sama would teach him how to survive. The blissful atmosphere of peace was interrupted by 3 shadows darting across the branches of nearby linden trees. A radio crackled faintly. Tora recognized the sound immediately. The humans who were chasing her often used these annoying devices. The first stood on end involuntarily, and a warning growl began to bubble in the throat. The long, bristling whiskers twitched comically in irritation. "What's wrong with you, Nico-chan?" the boy asked, looking around, knowing that something had angered his new acquaintance. In response, 3 shinobi landed from the trees, trapping them in a triangle. "How dare you steal Lady Shijimi's favorite cat?" The ninja with the neck protector lashed out at Naruto. What?" Uzumaki exclaimed in confusion, while Tora, arching her back, growled menacingly at the stranger. She sensed a threat from the arriving ninja, especially to her cub. "I didn't steal anyone." "What are you talking about, you lousy thief? That cat you're holding is named Tora, and it belongs to the wife of the fire daimyo. Give it back." Naruto was confused by the genin's words. He hadn't thought such an unusual cat could have an owner. Naniko, sensing the dark kaleidoscope growing within the cub, hissed angrily at the insolent man who had dared to reach out to her. She furiously grabbed his palm, her claws ripping through the thick glove and the skin beneath. The boy screamed in pain and surprise, trying to shake off the enraged animal. However, it was no use. Tora only let go when the hooks, sharpened by internal energy, stopped scraping against her bones. "You bitch! I'll kill you, I'll kill you!" The genin howled. "What are you standing there for? Grab it, you creature!" The remaining 2 were reluctant to engage the crazed beast, so they didn't attack, but they had no intention of breaking the encirclement. Seeing this, the wounded genin grabbed a kunai, intending to cut the hellcat to stop it from kicking too much. Naruto himself didn't understand what was driving him at that moment, perhaps juvenile folly, or perhaps a painful reluctance to be left without his newly acquired friend. Fear for the life and freedom of a living being sapped the last shreds of self-preservation, forcing him to rush in front of the kunai. The sharp blade grazed his outstretched hand, cutting a thin cut from his wrist to his forearm. "What are you doing?" the first genin's teammate shouted in fear. It was unclear whether he was addressing Naruto or his partner. "Don't you dare touch her, Nico-chan. She doesn't want to come with you. If you lay a finger on her..." The boy stepped forward menacingly, squinting angrily from under his brows. "I'll kill you, you freaks!" Naruto wasn't the least bit intimidated by the fact that he was clearly taking on real shinobi twice his age. And even though he was only 6 years old, small and inexperienced, he wouldn't let a friend be bullied. Because of the vast difference in their heights, the cub glared up at his attackers like an embittered beast. Such rage, mixed with confidence, bubbled up deep within that the teenage genin involuntarily retreated. The cat growled contentedly. "That's right, cub! Good job! Extend your claws, bare your teeth, show her it's dangerous to come near you." Of course, she was unhappy that her charge had been wounded, but she knew from experience that the most effective way to learn to fight is to fight in a real battle for your own life and the lives of your loved ones. Attack, bite, tear with your claws, snarl, and fight. Fight as fiercely as ever, so that the enemy goes mad with fear, so that they regard you with superstitious dread, and their greatest fear becomes meeting you again. Tora meowed loudly, attracting the cub's attention, and rubbed herself against his leg. The child immediately crouched down, examining the cat anxiously. She guiltily licked a fresh cut and walked toward her pursuers, who had been doing nothing all this time. Realizing his new friend was already leaving, Naruto whined piteously, quite animal-like, causing the cat's little heart to feel like a steel vise. She walked resolutely past the genin cradling his injured arm and proudly returned to the village, hissing every time one of her escorts was careless enough to turn toward her cub. She was acutely aware that these three meant him no good. "I hope to see you again, Tora-chan," the boy said sadly, waving his healthy hand to the departing cat. Honestly, Naniko was ready to drop everything and rush to her cub, to protect and comfort him, but now was not an option. She would definitely return. She would just have to deal with her owner and those guys. Tora, with her malicious feline nature, remembered everything and would definitely take revenge. Having managed to free herself from her persistent, noisy owner, Thora ran briskly in search of her little cub. 2 days had already passed since their meeting. The cat was very excited and was eager to find the kitten as quickly as possible. The day was unusually sunny and windless. The heat was terribly muggy, causing all the smells to stagnate, like water in a swamp, irritating. Suddenly, the Naniko's sensitive nose was touched by a familiar double scent, a sensation of dry heat, and the freshness of a stream in the morning. Afraid to lose this clue, Tora rushed along it. After wandering a bit through the bustling streets, she emerged into a vacant lot with a play area for human puppies in the middle. There, on a wooden bench, sat her cub all alone. He was sadly gnawing on something. Thora resolutely jumped onto his lap, checking what the little one was eating. "Tora-chan." Naruto was sincerely happy. The cat snorted critically and looked reproachfully into the blue eyes, which immediately darted around in embarrassment. Some dry crust was no food for her cub. Thora decisively knocked the bun out of the stranger's hands. "Hey! What's wrong, Tora-chan? That was my last bun," the child said, offended and indignant. Naniko snorted dismissively and jumped to the ground, beckoning affectionately. Naruto's expression, despite his hurt, instantly revealed a readiness to follow the cat anywhere, even into a fire, to the bottom of the ocean, even into the throat of a bijou without a second thought. Like a cheerful bunny, Uzumaki hopped after his friend, who skillfully weaved through the passers-by. She confidently led him to the edge of the village. Naruto beamed with happiness because Nico-chan had returned to him. She had kept her promise. The forest was cool and fresh. Tora enjoyed the pleasant shade from the dense canopy. The cub enjoyed it too, frolicking in the grass, trying to catch a grasshopper. Naniko led him to a wide meadow overgrown with small white flowers. "Why did we come here, Databeo?" Uzumaki asked loudly, mischievously catching up with his friend. The cat snorted irritably, urging the noisy cub to be quiet. The boy, surprisingly understanding what was expected of him, hid silently among the tall grass. Tora was pleased with his obedience. He was a good kitten and would be easier to train. Quickly locating a flock of partridges, which were abundant in this area, by scent, the Naniko crept up with a crouching gait. She did everything slowly, with feigned precision, so the cub would have time to memorize. Naruto diligently repeated, like a small predator. He tried to imitate his feline teacher. He didn't know why the cat was demonstrating this. To him, it was all an exciting game. Frozen before the bushes, already hearing the restless cooing of the stupid birds, the cat braced herself, unsheathed her claws, and leaped with a spring. Her torn feathers flew into the air, her wings flapped. Naruto gazed in awe at the large, gray-brown bird strangled in the hunter's jaws. It wasn't for nothing that her name meant tiger. The cat placed the carcass in front of the child, meowing loudly as if to say, "Look what a fat bird I caught! Is this for me instead of that bun?" "Databeo?" Uzumaki guessed. Tora meowed in agreement. "Thank you, Tora-chan." Jumping for joy, the boy began busily plucking the bird's carcass. He had already learned how to butcher game and even knew how to apply the basics. The strange, white-haired A&BU was furtively demonstrating simple shinobi techniques useful in everyday life. Tora watched the cub's actions closely. For some reason, humans dislike eating raw meat. Silly, but it had to be said, sometimes it was delicious. Under the Naniko's guidance, Naruto managed to roast the game in the embers of a lit fire. Covering himself in ash and dirt, burning his tongue and fingers, the hungry Uzumaki quickly gobbled the bird down. ignoring the bland taste of the meat, not forgetting to share the meal with his furry friend. One bird wasn't enough for the cub. Tora hadn't expected to stop at just one serving. Human puppies eat irregularly and generously. They need not only to be fed, but also to be taught to forage for food themselves. So, after cleaning up after themselves, they set out in search of their next victim. Game was plentiful in the Konoha forests. Within 20 minutes, they found a suitable target, a long-haired hare gnawing on the root of a wild chamomile. Holding his breath in tension, Naruto, at the cat sensei's urging, crept up on the gray rodent. He was cautious and quiet enough to approach unnoticed, but for some reason the hare sniffed the air warily, its cute nose twitching amusingly, and scurried into the bushes. The boy groaned in disappointment. He'd so wanted to show Tora-chan how well he'd listened, but it turned out as usual. The purring cat snuggled up to the boy's feet, soothing her despondent charge. After another master class, Tora caught and strangled a snake slithering past with one precise throw. Naruto was surprised. How could the viper not sense Tora-chan? The partridge hadn't even managed to spot the cat. Surely it wasn't just a matter of stealth? Having analyzed all the furry sensei's actions in his head, Uzumaki had difficulty realizing that the cat seemed to blend into the background, disappearing. Trying his best to imitate the cat, Naruto continued his search. After a while, luck smiled on him. Tora herself was surprised when the cub was able to immediately conceal his energy. With his reserves, this was almost impossible and caused many problems in everyday life. The amount and power of chakra in such a small body made it uncomfortable for weaker creatures to be around, but Tora wasn't some spoiled brat. She was a true ninja. What did that aura mean to her? She could clearly sense the duality of energy within the baby and could distinguish between the child's crystal-clear chakra and the heavy ash of the powerful entity within. This became an additional reason why she decided to take care of this cub. Naruto's search was successful. He finally managed to catch some small rodent. Uzumaki didn't know its name. Taking pity on the mouse, the boy let it go. He wouldn't have gotten enough anyway. Tora purred contentedly from her perch on a wide branch, observing her charge's progress. Jumping down under the tree, the cat led Naruto to the stash she'd hidden earlier. She'd long ago caught that very first hare for the cub's dinner. Having finished eating and teaching for the day, Tora walked the nodding child home. The cub's den turned out to be unusually unpleasant. Dirty, cold, and dark. As the Naniko had expected, he lived alone, without adult supervision. The cat growled discontentedly, shaking her paws with disgust, afraid to stain her pink pads with the flakes of black dust on the floor. Under his friend's reproachful gaze, Naruto laughed guiltily, scratching the back of his head. While the cat looked around, the boy awkwardly tried to hide the trash in a corner or gather up his untidily scattered clothes. Deciding to treat his friend, as she had been feeding him all day, Uzumaki poured milk into a saucer and placed it on the table. The cat lapped up the treat without question, but was more interested in the cold drawer where the cub stored his food. Poking her curious nose into the refrigerator, she quickly examined the contents. With mixed feelings, the Naniko demonstratively scratched the floor, as if burying dirty sand in a litter box. She would deal with that, too, but later. Having somehow explained to the cub that his paws, and for needed cleaning, the cat pushed him into a room with water, the kind humans use to wash themselves. Shaking drops of water from his icicle-like wet hair, the boy climbed onto the bed, wrapping himself in a blanket up to his ears. Thora lay down next to the cub, offering her broad back to the caresses of a small hand. "Thank you, Tora-chan. Today was so fun and wonderful. I wish every day was like this," the boy muttered, enjoying the soft, warm fur under his fingers. "You know, I'm entering the Shinobi Academy in 3 days. Old Hokage told me there are a lot of people my age there, and I'm sure I'll be able to find friends among them. But," he whispered uncertainly, "I'm not sure I'll succeed. I tried many times, but no one wanted to talk to me. For some reason, They don't like me. So how will that change at the academy? Naruto exclaimed heatedly, unleashing the stifling resentment that had been building up inside him onto his only listener. In a gesture of support, Tora crawled toward his face, rattling louder than usual. She nuzzled his forehead with her wet nose, evoking tender feelings. But now it doesn't matter at all. Naruto smiled happily from ear to ear. I have you, Tora-chan. And I don't need anyone else. The cat waited until the blonde kitten fell asleep. She quietly slipped out the half-open window and raced into the night, knowing she would definitely return. Tell me your suggestions for how the story should develop. Should we have a time skip? Or would several gaps of a couple of years be better? Or should I, like many authors, just bury myself in canon up to my ears? Today, Uzumaki Naruto didn't know what to do with the excitement pouring out of him. He was entering the academy. He would be a shinobi. A shinobi. Half an hour ago, a messenger had come to him and collected his final application documents, handing him his student ID card in exchange. Now Naruto was galloping briskly toward the school, ignoring the world around him. The square in front of the building's entrance was already filled with this year's incoming children and their chaperones. Naruto puffed out his cheeks in frustration, as even the orphanage children had come with a caregiver, while he was once again alone, like a tree in the steppe. Shinobi in identical uniforms walked out onto the wooden stage. Apparently teachers. Naruto particularly remembered a woman with long curly hair and glasses, and a young man with a large scar across his face and a kind look. He wished one of them would become his homeroom teacher. Next came the old Hokage, wearing his trademark silly hat with a curtain at the back and smoking a pipe. Sarutobi greeted everyone and began a lengthy introductory speech. Naruto grew bored after 2 minutes. Stepping out of the uneven rows of children, among whom he felt strangely uncomfortable, he headed for the tree swing. Uzumaki could feel the stinging, piercing gazes on his skin. The prospect of studying here no longer seemed so enticing. Suddenly, a familiar meow was heard from above. Naruto lifted his head, trying to peer through the blinding rays of the sun. Tora's striped face peeked out from the dense foliage. Uzumaki broke into a wide smile. "I'm so glad you came," he exclaimed softly, catching the cat as it jumped down to him. She had previously made it clear how much she disliked loud, harsh sounds. Tora twitched her tail proudly, as if to say, "I couldn't help but come, kitten." Children require constant attention and want their parents to be there for them, not just in times of mortal danger. The cub gratefully accepted the unobtrusive care, basking in the warm waves of feline love. Naruto was already the center of attention, and with Tora's arrival, he became almost as important as the Hokage himself. Many shinobi turned pale at the sight of the daimyo's wife's favorite in the boy's arms. The two leading demons of Konohagakure had quietly formed a bond. The Hokage finished his speech, and the students filed into the academy for their first orientation lesson. Uzumaki reluctantly left his furry friend sitting on the swing, unsure if animals were allowed inside. According to the posted list, he was placed in Class A. Entering the right room, Naruto hurried to take a strategic spot by the window. For some reason, no one sat next to him. To Uzumaki's delight, the ninja with the scar on his face became his class teacher. The teacher introduced himself as Yumino Irika, inviting the others to tell their stories. The students took turns coming to the board, each expressing their desire to be strong, what position they wanted to hold, and who they wanted to protect. One dark-haired boy wanted to be a cloud and simply float through the sky. The line gradually approached Uzumaki, making him increasingly nervous. How should he introduce himself? What should he say? Would they point fingers at him, as passers-by often do? A blonde girl in front of him spoke of her love of flowers and headed to her seat, giving Naruto the line. The panicked boy moved toward the board, under the gaze of many eyes. Facing the class, he took a deep breath, casting a hesitant glance out the open window. His eye caught a familiar brown fur among the large maple leaves. Tora was lying on a branch directly across from his classroom window, lazily wagging her luxurious tail. The cat's amber eyes opened slightly, gaping wide. A timid warmth displaced the child's unwelcome anxiety, instilling confidence. Tora-chan supported him, and with her, Naruto feared nothing. So he decisively raised his head, shaking off his doubts. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, Databeo. I like to draw on walls and adore eating ramen. And I will definitely become Hokage. I'll show you what I'm made of yet, he declared loudly, blazing with determination. There were so many ambitious statements. The class didn't take Naruto's speech as seriously as they might have. But his presentation was definitely the most confident of all. Thora watched her cub with satisfaction. The pup had plenty of courage, a fine quality for someone who had spent their life in endless battles. The whispering murmurs of his classmates caught Naruto's attention, causing him to perk up like a small animal. The children were quietly discussing how their parents had warned them to be wary of a boy named Uzumaki. Those who weren't aware were briefed by their deskmates. Naruto pursed his lips in displeasure, but wasn't at all upset. He waved at his furry friend. The main thing is that Tora-chan loves him, and the rest can go to hell, maybe even to the forest of death. When the introductory lesson ended, Naruto hurried outside, back to the swing where the ninja was sleeping. He'd been so dreading his first day at the academy, but it turned out to be the happiest day of his life. Unless, of course, you count the day he met Tora-chan. Thanks for waiting. The boy beamed with bright happiness, running up to the cat stretching sweetly in the sun. Come on, I'll show you the best ramen in Konoha. Let's celebrate my admission. I'm treating you, Databeo. Thora obediently followed the joyful cub. If he wanted to rest so much today, let him do what he wanted. Homework could be postponed for a bit. Naruto expressed a desire to carry his furry friend, but she was too big and heavy to ride on his shoulders, so he had to take her in his arms. Along the way, they encountered an Inuzuka patrol with 3 Nikin. Naruto was afraid they would fight his precious Tora-chan. But instead of attacking, the dangerous dogs greeted the cat with respectful nods, like old friends. The friends quickly reached a low, doorless building with a worn wooden counter, and the delicious smell of meat and boiled noodles. Hello, old man Tucci. I'll have 2 double pork. The boy ordered his favorite dish from the doorway, beaming with boundless happiness as he jumped onto the seat. Oh, hello, Naruto. The shop owner greeted him. Seeing the boisterous blonde's companion, he frowned and said regretfully, Sorry, Naruto, but we don't allow pets. The wide smile instantly faded from the child's face. The boy frowned in offense, raising his pleading, wet eyes to the noodle maker. Please, old man. Tora-chan is the smartest cat I've ever seen. She's smarter than some people, and she's my friend. The cat was very flattered by the way the cub defended her. The child's sincerity was captivating. It's rare to meet such bright people. Well, all right, if you say so, I'll make an exception for her. Let this be my gift for your admission. The old man squinted slyly, causing a fine mesh of wrinkles to streak his face. He didn't want to turn down his favorite client, and finding a separate bowl for the cat wouldn't be a problem. It was clear that Uzumaki would be stopping by again with his new friend, who was definitely not just any cat. Tucci had lived in the shinobi village for a long time, had trained as a reunion for a time, and had seen all sorts of things. And the Naniko who had come with the young Uzumaki was a celebrity among the Leaf Genin. Madame Shijimi's Hellcat. What? Really? Thank you so much, old man Tucci. You're the best. The child rejoiced, jumping up and down. As soon as the bowls of intoxicatingly fragrant ramen landed on the counter with a soft thud, Naruto grabbed his chopsticks, broke them, and instantly swallowed half a pickled egg. He was so eager to finish his meal, as if someone was about to steal his delicious noodles, that he got soup all over himself, spilling some on the counter. Hearing a sudden grumble from the side, Naruto turned his head and met a familiar reproachful gaze. Unlike him, the cat ate calmly and meticulously, maintaining the dignity and grace of an aristocrat. The boy felt excruciatingly ashamed, having never previously considered how to eat properly. He tried to imitate Tora, putting small pieces into his mouth rather than as much as he could fit, and chewing slowly. Tucci watched this scene with awe and admiration. No human could force Uzumaki to observe basic rules of decency. For a cat, it was a piece of cake. As she finished the last bits of meat in the ramen, cut into small pieces by the compassionate chef, Tora couldn't help but admit that the dish was quite tasty and nutritious. She liked not only the food, but the place as well. The atmosphere was pleasant, and no one wished her child any harm. Thanking the human for the generous treat with a loud meow, the cat pulled her charge outside. Enough rest. No one canceled the training. The child urgently needs to be taught to conceal his bloodlust and intentions, otherwise, at this rate, he won't catch any significant prey for a long time. And eating frogs and grass snakes is no fun. Hiruzen wearily listened to the tearful lamentations of a plump woman with excessive makeup. This high-ranking official loved to spend long periods of time in Konoha, invariably losing her beloved cat 3 times a day. And you couldn't just dump this hysterical woman on the administration staff or the politicians, sir. The highly respected wife of the daimyo of Hai no Kuni wielded considerable influence. The animal escaped so often that the Hokage Tower administration now paid Jinin to capture the Hellcat. But lately, Toru-chan has become increasingly difficult to catch. Almost no one has been able to find her. Consequently, the mini tiger's worried owner is now pestering the third. Okay, Mr. Jimmy, if you're so worried about Toru-chan, I can use Jutsu to see where she is and send a team there. Hiruzen gave in, trying to rub away the beginning of a migraine with his fingers until he died. I'll be very grateful to you, Hokage-sama. I won't survive if something happens to Taratka, the woman exclaimed, collecting tears from the corners of her eyes. Trying not to show how irritated he was, Sarutobi produced a crystal ball the size of a grown man's fist. He placed it theatrically in front of himself. The old man loved to show off in front of civilians, and Hiruzen sent a brief pulse of chakra into the ball. The cloudy, whitish surface somehow reflected the courtyard in front of the shinobi dormitory. 2 figures, a feline and a boy, sat on the grass near a dilapidated fence wall, alternately placing their hands on it. Sarutobi looked doubtfully at the lit pipe in his hands, trying to remember what interesting thing he could have filled it with. Surely he couldn't have imagined a half-breed ninja teaching a half-breed Uzumaki how to concentrate chakra in his palms. As if following the Hokage's random thoughts, the brick under Naruto's palm crumbled into sand from the excess energy. Hiruzen rubbed the bridge of his nose, no longer trying to get rid of the headache. The boy was only 6. How could he use chakra if he wasn't even supposed to feel it? Could it really be his parents' legacy? Well, if so, that wouldn't be surprising. Taratka. She's fine. Madame rejoiced, literally burying her face in the ball. And who's that cute boy with her? This is Uzumaki Naruto, my lady. A noisy, mischievous boy, an orphan, and from this day forward a student of the Shinobi Academy. Oh, and he became friends with Taratka. It's rare that anyone manages to do that, she said, touched, and then thought, You said the child is an orphan? A very nice boy. The woman seemed to be deliberately thinking until Sarutobi took the smoking pipe into his mouth, and then, Will you give him to me as a servant? He will look after my beloved Tora. Hiruzen choked on a deep drag, coughing hoarsely as smoke cascaded through his lungs. Life hadn't prepared him for this. Cough, cough, huh? I beg your pardon, but Naruto-kun has great potential as a shinobi and is very important to the village. I cannot let him go, even if it is your request, mistress. I don't think that will be a problem. The woman shook her head, smiling flippantly. I will hire the best teachers for the boy. He will become a first-class ninja, just as you wanted. Hiruzen considered this. The prospect was truly tempting. No one was eager to train Naruto. Well, except Danzo. But he absolutely couldn't give the child to him. He'd raised someone completely devoid of feelings and emotions. The fourth and his wife's assets were under lock and key. Literally, only Naruto himself could access them upon reaching a certain age. The old man wouldn't mind spending his money, but finding time for the child would be next to impossible. Life in the daimyo's palace will be comfortable and safe for Naruto, provided no one reveals his identity. Otherwise, the village's enemies will surely get their hands on the Jinchuriki. No evil glances or whispers will haunt the young Uzumaki anymore, and he will receive more than adequate training. The daimyo has 12 guardian ninja in his service, including his son Asuma. Sarutobi Jr. will not be able to refuse his father's request to look after the child, despite all their differences. "I need to discuss this matter with the council," Hiruzen finally answered, continuing to peer into the crystal ball. Laughing at the cat's antics, Naruto had a cheerful blush on his tan cheeks, and was so happy and enthusiastic that the old man's heart ached from the fact that he dared to think about the decision. Ryunin is a ninja chef. Shinobi of this type appeared in one of the anime's filler episodes. It was early morning when her owner picked up a sleepy Tora and headed out for a traditional stroll. The cat didn't give much thought to where they were going, nestled comfortably in the warm arms of her beloved. For a whole week, she runs to the cub every day, and, strangely, during this entire time, no search parties have come for her. And the owner smiles strangely, perhaps in anticipation, when the cat returns to her late in the evening. The lady's walk with her cat ended in the smoky office of the village's oldest man. Snorting with distaste at the unpleasant, tickling smell, Tora allowed herself to be seated on a wide, faded green sofa, the upholstery reeking of tobacco, just like everything else in the room. Despite her aggressive nature, the Naniko wouldn't have shown any displeasure with the surroundings, if not for the faint traces of chakra detectable in the pale smoke rings. The mistress struck up a familiar conversation with the old man in the square hat. A minute later, tea and a bowl of sweets were brought. The cat couldn't resist the pleasure of eating a small chocolate bar. She had no reason to listen to idle chatter, but at some point, her cub's name flashed by. Her ears immediately perked up, aimed at the speakers. "Don't worry, madam. Naruto will be brought soon," the old man assured her mistress in a hoarse, smoke-filled voice. "Oh, I can't wait. I want to finally see that boy." The woman smiled sweetly. Tora suddenly seemed to sense a familiar, dual aura rapidly approaching the office. And next to it, another, an adult one, also familiar, definitely associated with something canine. There was a soft knock, the door opened, and her blonde kitten appeared on the threshold, accompanied by a tall, white-furred man in a mask. "Hello, old man. Why did you call?" the loud-voiced boy asked without ceremony, glowing like the morning sun as soon as he spotted his furry friend. Oh, Naruto-kun." Hiruzen laughed like an old man at the youth's fervor. "Say hello to Lady Shirjimi. She wanted to meet you." "Hello." The boy bowed slightly to the plump woman in an expensive blue kimono. The lady's dark brown hair was styled in a comical, traditional three-piece hairstyle. For some reason, it reminded Naruto of a radish. "Hello, Naruto-kun. How glad I am to finally meet you," the woman chirped, stretching her heavily painted pink lips. Uzumaki liked her smile and good-natured appearance. "You're so sweet. No wonder my Taraachka liked you." Naruto tilted his head towards the sharp shoulder in surprise, frowning slightly in thought. "Eh? So you're Tarachan's owner?" the boy exclaimed in amazement, pointing his hand at the cat pretending to be asleep. "So why did you want to meet me?" The woman was touched by the child's simplicity and ardor. Rarely did anyone in her circle allow themselves such liberties. Perhaps the boy would be a good acquisition for more than just being a servant for her beloved cat. "The thing is, Naruto-kun," Hiruzen began to explain, "that Lady Shirjimi wished to see you as a servant in the daimyo's palace." "What? No, old man, this won't do." Uzumaki was indignant, unceremoniously interrupting the Hokage. "I only recently entered the academy." "Shinobi. I want and will be a shinobi databeo." You'll become a shinobi, Hiruzen reassured the boy. You'll be provided with good teachers. In exchange, you'll have to constantly take care of Tora-chan. Hearing the cherished name, the child fell silent and thoughtful. Tora liked the owner's idea. This way, the cub would live close to her. Looking after him and training him would be much easier. So, all I have to do is continue being friends with Tora-chan? That's right, darling. You've become such good friends with Tarachka that I couldn't separate you, the woman explained, stroking Naruto's childishly plump, striped cheeks. What about the academy? Uzumaki asked, carefully breaking free from his mistress's surprisingly strong grip. Irika-sensei said that those who didn't go to the academy won't be able to get the headband. Oh, don't worry, Naruto-kun. While Lady Shurjimi is in Konoha, you'll attend classes and take exams like all the other children. And I will be able to stay with Tora-chan forever and ever? Yes, Naruto-kun, Hiruzen agreed. The naive hope in the child's eyes was irresistible. It was astonishing how much he'd grown attached to the cat in such a short time. But then, I won't have to live in Konoha, Uzumaki asked, puzzled. You said Shijimi-sen wants to take me to the daimyo's palace. And you'll let me go? Just like that? That's right, Naruto, I'll let you go. You will become a shinobi of Konoha, even if you live outside its walls, and you will remain faithful to the will of fire. I believe in that. Hiruzen is willing to let little Uzumaki live outside of Konoha for a while. He won't tell you how much effort it took to arrange this. He's had to spend the past week not only arguing hoarsely with the council and the clans, but also maintaining the crystal ball jutsu so that Lady Shurjimi can remain at peace about her little one. We have other ninja in the palace. They are busy guarding my husband, the daimyo's wife continued. Tora felt the cub's emotions fluctuate. His thoughts were like a wide-open window. The little one was struggling to decide, should he change nothing? Fearing the unknown, or should he embrace the new, leaving all his accumulated negativity behind, cherishing his friendship with the wonderful Naniko? With a sweet stretch, Tora jumped onto the table to be at the child's eye level. Naruto immediately reached out to the cat. What doubts could there be? Uzumaki would follow his friend anywhere. Hiruzen grinned into his folded hands. He probably already knew the answer. The cat gave the old man a clear, completely human look. She would be able to take care of her cub. The wheels of the ornate carriage creaked rhythmically. Lady Shurjimi was returning to the capital, accompanied by numerous guards. A small boy, dressed in rough but expensive traveling clothes, ran alongside her. A dark gray cloth mask covered the lower half of his face, and a swamp green jacket hung loosely over his shoulders, concealing his frail frame. At the beginning of the journey, he rode in the carriage with his mistress, but quickly grew bored. Lady Shurjimi chuckled quietly at the child's antics. The boy had ventured beyond the shinobi village for the first time and couldn't contain the surging joy within him, eager to share his happiness with those around him. This had already managed to injure a couple of the guards, who were bombarded with endless questions by the child. The horses pulling the cart also received attention. A bouquet of roadside flowers was collected and presented to the touched lady. Tora decided the cub had played enough, and unless its energy was channeled elsewhere, it would only fizzle out. Thanking its owner with a loud purr, the Naniko jumped out of her arms. Meow, she called. The cub immediately rushed to the cat, forgetting that a second ago he had been trying to beg Kina-san for at least a single kunai or a couple of throwing stars for practice. Tora beamed with undisguised satisfaction. That's how devoted and obedient her kitten was. Having captured the child's full attention, Tora began demonstrating some techniques that help animals navigate space. One adorable feature of the cub immediately became apparent. The striped markings on his cheeks turned out to be somewhat similar to a cat's whiskers. Having gotten the hang of it, the cub was already moving freely through the dense thickets along the road. From time to time, Tora, climbing into the trees, would drop small dry branches or pebbles on her charge, forcing Naruto to dodge. The ninja guards watching them chuckled at the boy's darting. He managed to get caught in thorns more than once, fall into a ravine, and collect a tangle of burrs on his clothes and twigs in his hair. Despite everything, Tora was pleased with the results of the light training. The clumsy kitten was coping well with her instructions. He had excellent reflexes, almost animal-like. It was worth rewarding his charge, especially since the kitten was starting to whine. Thora went to her mistress, her whole demeanor hinting that it was time for dinner. Meanwhile, the cub was circling the food guard. "I can't stand it anymore," the boy whined. "Then eat when we stop for a rest," the man answered with a sigh. The boy knew how to be intrusive. "What?" The child immediately perked up. "Air," he muttered, just to get the blonde guy to leave him alone. "But I don't like air," Naruto exclaimed, shaking his hands indignantly. Tora grinned cat-like, allowing herself to be stroked by her master's hands. The sly little fox was deliberately harassing people, forcing them to feed him. She had taught him this trick 3 days earlier. Usually, all the humans would feed her as soon as she'd run around for a bit. The cub needs more exercise, and then any two-legged creature would gladly give her their food, if the kitten would at least smile at them. Mr. Shirjimi, seeing her favorite's mood, wanted to stop. Naruto happily dug into the portion he was given, but ate carefully, which pleased Mr. Shirjimi and elicited a satisfied grumble from Tora. The warm night shone rhythmically with stars fading in anticipation of dawn. In one of the guest rooms of the opulent palace of the ruler of Hinokuni, a small boy slept restlessly, tossing and turning so much that at one point he fell off the edge of the bed, tangled in the blanket, and remained there. A large brown cat dozed beside him. She couldn't leave her kitten alone on the first day in a new place. A sudden change of environment is always very stressful. When Toru, still a kitten, was taken from the large basket with the soft blanket that had been her entire world at the time and brought into her owner's huge room, the cat hid in corners for a long time, desperately hissing and scratching. They arrived at the palace late in the evening, when the fair-haired puppy was already dozing in the carriage next to his mistress. Seeing how worried her favorite was about the child, the mistress allowed Thora to spend the night in the fox cub's room. The cub twitched violently and whined softly in its sleep. Thora was instantly at the baby's face. His light brows were drawn together, his eyes were tightly squeezed shut, and his white lips were pressed tightly together in a gesture of unbearable agony. He was dreaming of something extremely unpleasant, frightening, and painful. The frightened Nico bit the child on his sensitive ear. The cat got its way. The cub woke up screaming and jumped up on the blanket. Tora! Tora-chan, whine! The boy barely managed to squeeze out, grabbing the thick fur with shaking hands, groping for his friend in the darkness. Thora purred loudly, drowning out the child's sobs. The cub had suffered more than just a nightmare. With her animal senses, the cat clearly sensed something dark writhing within the human puppy. Those vile, foolish humans had left the cub alone with a monster. Never mind, Thora would right this blatant injustice. A large brown cat ran down the spacious hallway. Her owner was usually an early riser, and Tora needed to visit her before returning to raising her cub. "Oh, Tarachka! How good that you came!" The lady, bustling about the closet, exclaimed joyfully, just having caught sight of her favorite. "Look! Which one would suit you best?" A pile of various small-sized clothes, like those for a child, was laid out in front of the ninja. The cat examined the items critically, decisively rejecting the uncomfortable traditional garments. They were difficult to move in and difficult to put on. The pants and jackets, reminiscent of the uniforms of local ninja guards, deserved more attention. A set of dark gray bloomers and a pale orange shirt with elbow-length sleeves seemed most suitable. After a brief hesitation, the owner accepted her favorite's choice, adding a vest and a bright red long belt. While the items were simple enough for sophisticated aristocrats, the expensive trim and high-quality fabrics prevented them from appearing cheap. Still, it's worth remembering that little Uzumaki is no simple civilian servant. He's a future shinobi from a clan, albeit annihilated, but great. Having given her maid's orders, Lady Shurjimi proceeded to the dining hall to share a meal with her beloved husband. The ruler of Hai no Kuni, in contrast to his wife, was a thin, long-haired man of middle age. He was not handsome and was difficult to talk to due to his peculiar manner of speaking, but his hold on power was not based on appearance alone. Just as the ruling couple began to eat, a young maid quietly slipped into the hall, standing patiently behind her mistress. Shurjimi listened to the girl's whisper, waving her hand graciously, inadvertently revealing the shiny pink polish on her neat nails. The maid left and returned a minute later with a small, fair-haired boy. Tora purred happily, calling the cub with a drawn-out meow. The daimyo looked at her with surprise. For the first time in his memory, his wife's clever cat greeted anyone other than her mistress. The boy glanced briefly at the people in the room, then immediately appeared beside the Niniko. A separate low table had been set up for the cat, where several dishes were already set. The daimyo's wife wasn't exactly a spoiled, capricious aristocrat. Her only quirk was her fanatical love for her pet, which wasn't so bad, considering the existence of feline summoning, which was worshipped as a deity. Tora wagged her tail sternly, looking at the cub. The child, embarrassed, quickly bowed to his mistress and her husband in greeting. Shurjimi gestured to the boy, who couldn't hide his curious gaze. "Good morning, Naruto-kun." The woman smiled, starting to pinch the child's striped cheeks. "Did you sleep well in your new place? How are you settling in?" Uzumaki was deeply embarrassed by the woman's actions. No one in all of Konoha had ever tried to coddle him. It felt strange and unusual to suddenly find himself the target of such intrusive advances. "Why yes, good morning, mistress. Never slept so well in my life, Databeo," Naruto muttered, still unsure of how to properly address Torichan's mistress. The old Hokage explained that she was a very important woman and deserved more respect. However, the need to be cautious in conversation was contrary to the Uzumaki's nature, so the boy was tormented by the inability to relax. Of course, the daimyo saw this and chuckled into the white silk of his fan. A curious child. It was good that his wife had decided to take him in, even if only temporarily. "Ah, Naruto-kun, these things suit you so well. I hope you like them," the lady rejoiced, examining the boy's new clothes. "Ah, how I would love to see you in a formal Shugenin uniform when you grow up a little. I'm sure my husband and I would be immensely happy if you agreed to stay in the palace as my personal ninja. But alas, your path is different," she sighed sadly. Naruto was surprised but said nothing. He didn't understand much, but he hoped Tora would explain it to him later. "I am counting on you, young Uzumaki," the daimyo said, smiling easily at the bewildered child. "That despite the impossibility of becoming my Shugenin, you will remain loyal to the Land of Fire. You will be ready to defend its rulers, its people, and its borders." Naruto understood that. He was simply being asked to be a shinobi, what he had always wanted to be. Sensing the cub's pleasant confidence, Tora narrowed her eyes in satisfaction. Her cheeky kitten had already grasped the principles of adaptation in the human world. "In the meantime, Naruto-kun, do us the honor of joining our breakfast." The man waved his hand, inviting him to the table. The boy didn't need any persuading. He was never one for modesty. He thanked her for the food and began happily devouring the most delicious dishes he'd ever tasted. Too bad there was no ramen. Tora led the cub to the training grounds where her mistress's ninja guards often spent time. Still, the ninja understood that she couldn't teach a human cub everything a human needed to know. The boy looked around curiously. How unusual it all was. It wasn't like Konoha. No one had ever yelled at him, or been mean, or even given him a sideways glance. Maybe it was the bandage on his shoulder? Andy Shurjimi said the Shugenins wore a similar one. And that servant girl, seeing it, bowed to the boy, as if he were some kind of important person. They walked out into the open area where 4 ninja were training. The adults noticed them as they approached. "Who do we have here?" asked a tall man with shaved sides. For some reason, the boy didn't like him. "Oh, this is Mistress's new toy," explained the nondescript guy next to the first one. "I'm not a toy. Torichan is my friend," Naruto shouted, seething with indignation. He couldn't stand it when people didn't take him seriously. Tora growled loudly. For all his bravery, the cub was extremely reckless. But she would have a word with these humans now. She was about to explain in simple terms that her cub shouldn't be harmed when the boy suddenly snorted like a beast right into the shinobi's laughing faces. The child's stance shifted subtly, as if a predator were about to strike. The growl that came out was very similar to the purr of an Aniko. Despite all this, the boy spoke with a strange pity in his voice. "You're very arrogant. Isn't it hard for you to live like this, Shinobi-san?" The boy's cold words made the adults almost slam their mouths shut, stopping their laughter. If she could, Tora would have chuckled. The cub had perfectly mimicked her behavior. Perhaps she'd been a bit overprotective. A tall, dark-haired man with a short beard emerged from the covered passageway leading to the training ground. Tora immediately caught the irritating scent of tobacco, strangely familiar. "Yo, guys! What's all that noise?" he asked, approaching his colleagues. "Oh, hi, Asuma. We met the new guy here, and he's got a lot of character." "Oh!" The man raised his eyebrows, as if remembering something. "That's what your father said about you. Your name, kid, is Naruto, right?" "Yes, I'm Naruto, Databeo." The cub answered briskly, picking up the cat that asked to be picked up. "And what's your name, uncle?" "Sarutobi Asuma." The Jonin introduced himself, throwing away his extinguished cigarette. His father asked him to keep an eye on the boy while he was at the palace. Asuma didn't want to be responsible for the Jinchuriki, but he couldn't refuse. While he was thinking, the cat gave him a meaningful look, and Sarutobi Jr. could have sworn he saw a clear order in the cat's amber eyes, as if from a superior. A terrifying cat. "Eat this, Naruto-kun." He awkwardly scratched his beard. "Would you like to learn how to throw kunai?" Kiba's gaze darted around the classroom and spotted the upstart Uzumaki, who declared himself Hokage, only vouched for the first week and then vanished. And now he'd suddenly returned to class, as if it were his destiny. Rumor had it he'd been spirited away from Konoha. But who or why didn't seem to matter to the dog lover. With absolutely nothing else to do right now, he resolutely headed for the last row, his hands stuffed into his shorts pockets. "Hey, you! You smell like cats," he said sharply, hoping to offend his opponent. "And?" The blonde raised an eyebrow phlegmatically, not intending to deny it. The boy with the tattoos on his cheeks was clearly an Inuzuka, and they're known for their aggressive, animal-like nature. There's no point in giving them a reason unless you're looking for a fight. It irritates me. I hate cats. The boy loomed over his desk menacingly. "I like cats. Especially Torichan," Uzumaki replied calmly, turning indifferently toward the window, indicating he didn't want to talk anymore. Tora had taught him not to fall for teasing and to keep his temper. The memory of that lesson brought a faint, dreamy smile to her face. One day, they escaped from the palace to the city, running along the wide streets. In one of the alleyways, they stumbled upon the local furry inhabitants. Several large alley cats were squabbling in a flower bed with small pink flowers. Clumps of fur, dust, uprooted flowers, and even earth flew everywhere until the fighters noticed the guests. The cats united against the aliens, forming a semicircle and purring loudly. Despite their numerical superiority, they were in no hurry to attack, and Tora, with the most independent air, demonstratively licked the fur on her paw. A large white cat stepped forward, dirty, with a torn ear and a feral face. He purred deep in his throat at the imperturbable Tora. Naruto was slightly startled. The cat looked very imposing. Uzumaki was about to rush to drive the beast away, but Tora stopped him. The cat meowed languidly and turned around, as if deliberately flicking her tail near his muzzle. She looked incredibly sweet and beautiful at that moment, but her aura was clearly perceptible, saying, "Any unnecessary movement, and I'll stop being a cute kitten, turning into a mad monster capable of tearing you to pieces." At that moment, Naruto sincerely admired his furry friend. She had so easily avoided an unnecessary fight without losing an ounce of dignity. He sensed her overwhelming aura, the one that made cats stay put, afraid to attack. And Naruto desperately wanted to learn how to do the same. Later, the Torah clearly demonstrated that the first and most important step to achieving this state is self-control. "Hey, are you listening to me?" Uzumaki shouted right into his ear. Naruto jumped in surprise. A thin ringing sound filled his ear. Apparently, infusing the body with chakra to enhance the senses had its significant downsides. "What are you bothering me about?" Naruto growled irritably, turning to face his noisy classmate. He didn't notice his eyes flash red, but Kiba was startled by the sudden, suffocating wave that washed over him. "Don't be so cheeky, Uzumaki," Kiba faltered. He didn't like Uzumaki's mannerisms. They were too familiar and understandable, like an animal. "I'm still in charge here, and I'll show you what I'm made of in today's tests. I bet you won't even be able to get a passing grade." Kiba realized he'd gotten a little carried away, but he couldn't stop himself in time. Yes, Naruto nodded, not intending to offend the dog owner, but the boy became enraged at his interlocutor's dismissive tone. "You're asking for it, Uzumaki. I'll smash you to pieces during our first sparring session." Inuzuka howled, slamming both palms loudly onto the tabletop, causing Shikamaru, who had been sleeping, to suddenly wake up. Naruto bared his teeth at this gesture, a low, guttural sound escaping his throat. "You're strange," he said, looking straight into the dog owner's eyes. He seriously couldn't understand why people reacted so strangely to everything he did. It's truly difficult for Uzumaki to predict reactions to his actions, even though he understands some things intuitively. Torichan teaches him how to understand people, but she's not human and, alas, can't teach him everything. Kiba swallowed nervously. This boy was talking about weird stuff. "Listen up, Uzumaki! Don't even think about getting in my way!" Kiba growled as he walked off to his desk, leaving the last word to himself. Even so, the dog owner had a vague feeling he'd been casually made a fool of. Uzumaki didn't rise to the bait and didn't seem to understand what was expected of him, but he reacted harshly to open aggression. Kiba had already witnessed the behavior of Niken of all ages in the clan. Naruto wasn't much different from the animals in his reactions. Araka-sensei entered the classroom at the sound of the bell, immediately announcing the start of the test. Today they were testing their knowledge in most theoretical subjects. Naruto had no doubt about his knowledge. He had been taught brilliantly in the daimyo's palace. He had been forced to study mathematics, writing, history, etiquette, and other such nonsense alongside the grandchildren of the highly respected ruler of the Land of Fire. Practical training took place on the training grounds with Asuma-sensei and the other Shugenin who joined Uzumaki's training from time to time. He had learned the most from Torichan, so he had no doubt that he wouldn't be able to pass some stupid test. In the middle of the lesson, the little fox suddenly jumped up and ran to the exit, throwing the sheet of paper with the completed assignments on the teacher's desk. "Uzumaki, I didn't let you go. Get back to your seat now," Araka shouted angrily, but didn't pursue. According to the rules, a student who passes a test is free to leave the classroom. "I'd rather have my conscience burst than my bladder," Naruto shouted back carelessly and disappeared behind the door, no longer hearing the loud laughter of his classmates. Thora strolled leisurely down the hallway. Her kitten had been undergoing some kind of human testing in this facility today. How stupid. As if some kind of testing would be of any significant help in a real fight. She'd taken the cub from here a month ago and didn't regret it one bit. Torichan, Torichan! The little monster rushed down the corridor, howling loudly, waving its arms and choking with delight. This was the first time he'd sensed his friend's presence from such a distance. He can usually detect chakra within 10 meters, but now he'd managed to sense Tora-chan even before they reached the academy. Naruto, overjoyed, hurried to meet her, quickly scribbling his answers on the silly papers. Ugh, and he'd have to go to these boring lessons for another week until Lady Shirjimi deigned to return to the capital. Thora jumped into the arms of the frantic cub without hesitation, listening to his halting, enthusiastic speech. Having silently agreed to take a stroll through the village and stop by the familiar noodle shop along the way, the cat lay peacefully. Everything would have been fine, but on one crowded street, the Naniko overheard a conversation between two genin of about 14 years old. "Hey, is this really the same cat?" the boy in the bandana asked his friend in a low voice. "Yes, I'm sure of it. She's just got this bow on her ear and a gangster-like face," whispered the second. "Looks like she's escaped from her mistress again. They say the administration can offer money for her return." "Huh? What if she's already been assigned to another team? And the boy carrying her looks familiar," the boy said doubtfully. "Does it matter?" the ringleader snorted. "Whoever wins gets the money. And the boy, he's a local. A lonely orphan. Who's he going to tell? We'll take the cat and be done with it." Tora's entire body tensed, ready to run away to keep her cub from being harmed. But Uzumaki hugged his friend tighter. Naniko looked in surprise at her serious face, her pursed lips, and her determined gaze. The boy had heard what the genin were saying, too. He wouldn't let his beloved Tora-chan get hurt. Absolutely not, otherwise he wouldn't be Uzumaki Naruto. After all, it was his duty to protect Tora-chan. Reaching a wide stall selling a variety of fruits, Naruto suddenly took a sharp turn, disappearing around the corner. The genin rushed after him, but the nimble boy had already reached the end of the alley, emerging into a crowded intersection. Weaving through the crowds, Naruto looked for familiar escape routes. He'd often caused mischief in the past, which often meant running from angry villagers, so Uzumaki scouted out and prepared good openings and traps to thwart his pursuers. This time, he was lucky. There was a great alley nearby, always stocked with crates. Amid the shouts of his pursuers, the boy darted through a narrow passage between a high wooden fence and a whitewashed wall. He snaked through a hole in the fence covered by a heavy box, spilling out into someone's overgrown front garden. "Oh, Kami-sama! Where did you get so dirty, my dear?" Madame Shirjimi wailed, trying to wipe the dirt from the boy's striped cheeks with a silk handkerchief. He and Tora showed up at the hotel after lunch. Both were dusty and covered in whitewash, their palms and knees covered in small scratches and green grass stains. Their clothes were intact, but terribly dirty. Their dark fur was grayed with dust, and their bow had disappeared somewhere. "Sorry, Auntie," Naruto apologized, lowering his eyes. "Some genin chased us. They wanted to catch Tora-chan and take her to the Hokage Tower. But I didn't let them. I couldn't handle them in a fair fight yet, so we ran away. And while we were running, we had to go through a secret path, and it wasn't clear and, well, oh, my protector," the woman said with emotion, lightly pressing her finger on the boy's snub nose. "Well done, you protected Tarachka." Tora was pleasantly surprised. Her cub had once again demonstrated just how sophisticated it was. The little one had managed to successfully escape from the real ninja. A brilliant idea suddenly dawned on the ninja. It seemed she had a partner in her chase with the leaf genin. And now she would not only run, but also catch up. The entire junior staff of the village of Lista suddenly felt a slight, frightening chill on the back of their necks. Because the sequel was significantly delayed, I made this chapter a bit longer than the others to compensate. Well, I won't drag it out. Enjoy. The sliding door slammed loudly against the frame. A flock of maidservants carrying clean tablecloths into the dining room scattered in fright. A fair-haired boy rushed like a hurricane down the wide corridor of the opulent estate. The summer residence of the fire daimyo had been shaking like this for a week now, ever since the little ward of the formidable Tora had taken up residence there. "Good morning, Mayoko-chan." The boy shouted at the top of his lungs, jumping into the kitchen, "I'm hungry." A 10-year-old girl standing behind the burning stove jumped in surprise, almost knocking over her plate. "Naruto! You rascal! I told you not to do that again!" she shouted menacingly, turning towards the intruder with a ladle in his hands. "Well, what should we do with you? How many times have I told you? Servants are not allowed to make noise and run around the estate." "Ba ba ba, boor," the boy teased, sticking out his tongue, nimbly jumping onto a chair. "So what are we having for breakfast?" "The table hasn't been set for the lady yet, and I won't feed you before your time." "No way! I can't!" Mayoko objected categorically, crossing her arms. Her relationship with this restless child hadn't worked out since they'd first met. A year ago, Lady Shirjimi took the boy in as a personal servant for her beloved cat. The scoundrel turned out to be a future shinobi, and like all ninja, he trained, in a peculiar way. When he wasn't studying at the training grounds with the shogunin or with tutors in the library, he was snooping around somewhere with Tora. Mayoko was most often sent to find them, which was quite a task. Somehow, the girl began to treat the restless child with the warmth and sternness typical of older sisters, and the boy reciprocated, becoming deeply attached to the only girl his age in the daimyo's estate. "What? You don't even have to breathe. Give me some food," the boy insistently demands, because he knows that if he gives in, this naughty girl won't give him any food at all. Sighing dejectedly, Mayoko nevertheless places a tray with a bowl of rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables in front of him. Uzumaki grumbles that it's not his favorite ramen again, but obediently eats it within a minute and rushes off again, grabbing the tray of cat food she'd prepared for Tora. While taking a solemn stroll through the luxurious gardens of her country estate, Madame Shirjimi heard the giggling of songbirds interrupting the trills of songbirds. Unable to contain her curiosity, the woman followed the sounds, turning off the cobbled path. Beyond the lush, blooming bushes, she discovered a lawn, where she discovered a servant boy, Tora-chan's favorite. The blonde laughed merrily as he untangled a ball of thread on the ground. "Hello, Naruto-kun. What are you doing?" she asked, smiling sweetly, looking over the boy's shoulder. The sight that met her eyes touched the woman, sending her into seventh heaven. Her Tora, her beloved Tora, was once again acting like a little kitten. She had playfully gotten tangled in the kite string, and was catching the hands of the boy trying to untangle her with her paws. "Ah ha ha ha, oh auntie. Hello. Tora-chan and I decided to fly a kite." The boy squinted from the incessant laughter. He and Tora had been having a good time before the mistress arrived. "I'm glad you're having a good time with Taraachka. But haven't you forgotten anything, Naruto-kun?" Shirjimi smiled slyly. Uzumaki often forgot to do important things, for which he was punished more than once. However, only a ninja could make Naruto do everything on time and correctly. Only she had the boy's complete trust and respect. "Huh?" The child's face expressed surprise and intense thought, until slowly the realization came into his big blue eyes. "Oh, Databeo." He jumped up and down, waving his arms in panic. "Yes, Naruto-kun, you forgot that you need to pack for the trip. Tomorrow you'll be heading to Konoha to take your transition exams at the academy." Excuse me, Andy, I'm going to go get ready." The boy quickly untangled the cat from the kite's trap and set off for his room. "Tora-chan, come on, help me." The blonde boy darted off, the cat right behind him. The woman, who remained in the garden, continued her leisurely stroll, laughing kindly at the sunny boy. The crowd of academy students was loudly noisy, chattering, cursing, and laughing. The guards at the gates only sighed heavily. Now these restless children would gather under the supervision of their teachers, and finally head off to their practical training in the nearby forest. Yumino Irika, being the responsible teacher, meticulously checked each student and noted them down on his clipboard. Almost everyone was present, only one student was missing. Hokage-sama had personally issued orders that Uzumaki was to appear at the academy only during exams. Yumino didn't know why and for what reason the Jinchuriki had been suddenly sent to live and train outside of Konoha, and it wasn't his business, but with the boy's disappearance, things suddenly calmed down. "So, since everyone's gathered," Irika announced loudly, attracting the students' attention. "Wait, Irika-sensei." A familiar, ringing voice suddenly interrupted the teacher. A tall man and a blond boy landed in front of the gate. The blond boy briskly bounded toward the crowd of students, silently joining the end of the line, a show of discipline. "Hey, Irika-kun! Are we late?" A man with a short beard and a cigarette in his mouth greeted the academy instructor. Yumino was extremely surprised. He'd expected Uzumaki to skip today's test, but he arrived at the last minute, his mere appearance casting doubt on the need for his examination. Not only had Naruto arrived with Asuma Sarutobi, using the upper routes, something not every upperclassman could do, but the boy's appearance and equipment were flawless. A well-made, dark green, one-piece camouflage suit, a bandana concealing his prominent hair, a half mask, a backpack with gear, and a weapons pouch. "No, Asuma-san, you arrived just in time. We were just about to leave." "That's good," Sarutobi said, satisfied with his answer. He glanced at Irika's colleagues with disinterest and took a deep drag of his cigarette smoke. "Okay, Naruto, I'm going. The test is over. You'll go to the Hokage." "Hi, Asuma-sensei," Uzumaki shouted loudly. A column of students filed out the gate. Since they were only second-year students, the test was a simple hike, during which instructors assessed the students' skills and their behavior in the outdoors. Naruto, filled with bright hopes and a lingering anticipation, walked at the end of the line, to the left of a dark-haired girl with frightening white eyes. For some reason, she kept turning away from him and blushing. Uzumaki didn't touch her. Perhaps the girl had an allergy or some other illness. The boy couldn't stop thinking that the academy test had come at the perfect time. It was a full moon. Torichan had taught him that on the night of a full moon, any living being was much more open to the world. This night was a wonderful chance to bond with his classmates. It wasn't like Naruto had developed a strong affinity with the guys he barely knew. It was just idle curiosity. Uzumaki had little contact with his peers, and not much with other people either. He had a very limited social circle. So Naruto wanted to look at his classmates that night and compare them to himself, to find out what their inner essence was. Hinata would suit a bunny, just as cute as she was, Choji a kind teddy bear, and Sasuke was the spitting image of a venomous viper. The group arrived. Mamoto-sensei and Irika-sensei divided the boys into mini teams, assigning each their own tasks. Naruto, along with Shino Aburame and Ino Yamanaka, were given the honor of fetching enough water for everyone. Half listening to Ino's lamentations about her precious Sasuke, Naruto sniffed the air, making his whiskers stand out comically. Tora had long ago taught him the basics of survival. Lady Shirjimi loved visiting country estates nestled in the dense forest, where her beloved Tora could take walks. A dampness wafted from the east. Naruto headed there resolutely, pulling his companions along with him. It was a long walk. Uzumaki himself was surprised to sense water from such a great distance away. It seemed Chiriko-sen had said something about his hypersensitivity, similar to that of animals. Their team carried out the task flawlessly, collecting water from the stream and sealing everything in a scroll. Naruto was able to learn this in his spare time, too. It's a great help in saving space and time. The instructors praised them for their efficiency, giving them extra points. Unable to start a meaningful conversation with his teammates or anyone else, Naruto frustratedly wandered from one end of the camp to the other. He didn't need to pitch a tent. It definitely wouldn't rain today. He'd opened the sleeping bag from the scroll before bed, and there were still some rations left somewhere at the bottom of his bag. Rations. Ugh. A heavy sigh escaped his throat. He wanted some meat. However, Naruto shook himself. Who's stopping him from going and catching some? Joyful with his thoughts, he ran briskly deeper into the forest, ignoring the piercing gaze of the black eyes. He had a wonderful, meticulously thought-out plan for what he would do both now and in the evening, when everyone would gather around the fires. And it didn't matter at all that the plan had only just been hatched, literally 5 minutes before the sudden impulse to hunt game. Uchiha Sasuke was undisputedly considered the best student in his class. No one could or wanted to claim his place, and that suited him just fine. But this strange Uzumaki evoked mixed feelings and a vague sense of foreboding. He seemed to be fooling around, acting like a joyful idiot, but he looked serious. Sasuke didn't even know Uzumaki's approximate level of power, but somehow he sensed that the blonde wasn't as simple as he seemed. If this weren't the case, would they have trained him, assigning him a personal instructor? Uchiha perceived Sarutobi, Naruto's companion, as a mentor, although in reality, this was not the case. Asuma only helped Uzumaki with the basics, like the other Shugenin. Seeing Naruto run into the thicket, Sasuke, ignoring the pink-haired girl's squeal in his ear, followed him. Uzumaki was a dark horse. The Uchiha wasn't interested in the real him. Sasuke wanted to know how he could do it, and what he was capable of. The blonde man, hidden in the dense foliage, seemed to vanish. Sasuke had to wander for a long time before he heard the crunch of small twigs, as if something had fallen. 10 meters away, the one he was looking for jumped into the tall grass under a tree. Sasuke saw a fluttering bird in the boy's mouth. The handsome blonde strangled his prey painlessly and quickly. When he noticed his dark-haired classmate approaching, he growled reflexively. He was startled, not expecting a human throat to produce such a low, menacing growl. Recently, Torichan had been deliberately taking his prey away from him, forcing him to run wildly to get the food. Coming to his senses, Naruto spat the bird out of his mouth, rising smoothly to his feet. "Did you want something?" Naruto asked, trying to remember the name of the boy in front of him. "HN," Sasuke chuckled, twisting his lips. Frankly, he was at a loss. Uzumaki seemed wild, and, it seemed, crazy. Even Inuzuka hadn't acted so bestial, despite his strong bond with dogs. "So what do you want?" Naruto repeated, still waiting for no answer. He immediately decided that if his classmate wanted to ask him for something, Uzumaki would first deal with his captured lunch, and then with the black-haired boy's request. Torichan had firmly hammered into his head that the main thing was to have time to eat before the chaos began. "Nah, maybe you're hungry?" Sasuke blinked in confusion. He looked hungry? What kind of weird guy was this? "Oh, then we need to catch someone else. One hazel grouse won't be enough for us." The blonde continued to chatter, looking around. With a sharp throw, he accurately hit the skull of a snake crawling among the roots with his kunai. But then he suddenly jumped up, as if coming to his senses, looking terribly guilty. "Oh, sorry. You probably don't eat snakes. They're like your relatives, Databeo." Sasuke stared blankly at this, then chuckled vaguely for the third time. He should have been offended by the Uchiha's baseless comparison to reptiles, but Sasuke found it pointless. "Why don't you speak, just snort, Tabeo? Are you mute? Do you understand what I'm saying?" Naruto asked, genuine concern on his face, trying to peer into the dark eyes, perplexed by his interlocutor's reaction. It was hard to say why. In just a minute of talking to this blonde, the Uchiha had already doubted not only the sanity of his interlocutor, but also reality 3 times. "Oh, kid, I'm starting to worry about you. With every passing minute, I get the feeling that you and I aren't even the same species, Tabeo." Deciding to postpone the examination of Uzumaki's strength until the start of taijutsu practice, Sasuke turned and walked back to camp. He didn't need such worries with this abnormal boy. Left alone, Naruto just shrugged. Torichan had explained to him that people often misunderstand each other, so there was no need to be upset if they didn't make friends the first time. The sun had long since disappeared behind the treetops, giving way to a full, dark yellow moon lazily creeping into the sky. Tired from a day filled with a multitude of tests from the academy instructors, the children sat around the roaring fires. Scary stories were told. Stew was cooking over the fire. Cards had long since been drawn out. Shikamaru was playing shogi with Rinkusu-sensei, and the girls were discussing boys. When Uzumaki brought back to camp the catch he'd caught, along with the mushrooms and roots he gathered along the way, the surprised teachers gave the boy a perfect score without question. The boy from the Akimichi clan was especially delighted with the unexpected spoils, offering to cook everything himself for a fraction of the price. Naruto, not being greedy, happily agreed, sharing with anyone who wanted it. Torichan had shown him many times how to win people over, and appeasing with treats was a big part of that. Uzumaki made a sincere effort to befriend everyone, but he enjoyed hanging out with Kiba and Shino the most. Inazuka was a cheerful boy, somewhat reminiscent of himself. Aburame, on the other hand, was a very quiet and reserved boy. However, Naruto had no trouble getting him to talk. Tormented by a burning curiosity, Naruto sat on a wind-blown tree trunk. It was only a short time before the moon hung overhead, illuminating everyone in the clearing with its silver rays. Come on, Databeo, just a little bit more," Naruto whispered like a mantra, barely holding himself in place from impatience. Iruka, drinking tea not far from the boy, glanced at him with interest. At one point, Uzumaki jumped up, threw his arms up in the air, and cried out in frustration. "Why? Why, Naruto?" the teacher asked, not understanding why the blonde was so upset. The boy muttered inaudibly under his breath, ignoring Yumino's question. He peered intently, almost without blinking, at his classmates gathered around the fire. But all the conditions are met, Tabeo. The moon is full, the time is right, there aren't even any clouds. "Uzumaki!" Iruka said louder, trying to get the blonde to answer. Instead, almost everyone in the camp turned to look at them. "How is this possible, Iruka-sensei? Somehow, no one's beast showed up, even though the moon is shining." The boy babbled nonsense. Maybe I got the day wrong? Come on." The blonde jumped out of the shadow of the tall hornbeam he'd been sitting under, stepping into the pale moonlight. Instantly, silence fell. Iruka grabbed his kunai, taking a stance ready to defend his students. A barely noticeable reddish aura hovered around Naruto's body, taking the form of a beast with a long, fluffy tail, just like a fox. And the shadow wasn't human. No, it's the same as always. So why can't you see it with others?" The boy continued muttering, examining his hands, oblivious to the tense atmosphere. The pricked ghostly ears twitched in interest at the sound of one of the instructor's holsters snapping shut. Naruto looked up from his hands, immediately encountering a bristling, tense Iruka. A clenching fear welled up deep in his chest, and Uzumaki recoiled, staring at his teacher in disbelief. Those brown eyes, blazing with fear and hatred, reminded Naruto of how often he'd encountered similar ones on the streets of Konoha, and they were all directed at him. "So this isn't normal?" Naruto asked hesitantly. His voice dropped a whole octave, distorting the impression of the boy. The red aura deepened in color, making it possible to discern even the protruding, twitching whiskers, now spread out in all directions. The previously protruding, transparent ears flattened against the head, the reddened eyes widened, and the child seemed to shrink. Iruka, having regained his composure, managed to overcome the panic that washed over him at the strange aura surrounding the Jinchuriki. He was a ninja, after all, and a ninja must always be able to control his emotions. The boy across from him showed no aggression, made no attempt to attack. Despite the distinct outline of the fox spirit, Yumino sensed not a drop of that terrifying chakra. What surrounded Naruto's body now was something else, like a simple aura suddenly visible in the moonlight. Iruka tried to look friendly, putting the kunai back in his pouch. He stepped toward the wary child and spoke in a quiet, soothing voice. "Sorry, Naruto. What's happening to you is a little unusual. It's possible this is a special trait of yours, like the Kekkei Genkai of Clan Shinobi." Yumino saw that Naruto acted as if he genuinely believed that animal form was normal for humans. Perhaps he had no idea that this had had such an impact, or that he was a Jinchuriki. Eventually, Iruka managed to calm Uzumaki and the other students. The instructors quickly sent everyone back to their tents. While the others were dispersing, Naruto returned to his favorite ledge, unsealed his sleeping bag from the scroll, and hid inside, head down, only one eye peeking out. He noticed how the instructors had been keeping a close eye on him during their conversation, and even afterwards. They were practically ready to be right there with him in a flash, should anything happen. That night, Uzumaki didn't sleep. Iruka couldn't quite explain why the boy was different from other people. But Naruto wouldn't give up. He'd find the answers, no matter what. The first thing he should do was tell Torichan everything when he got back. She always knows what to do. A chill wind, chilled by the overnight rain, crept beneath my clothes, pleasantly cooling my skin, warmed by the bright rays. The little birds chirped their cheerful songs, hiding in the soothing rustling of the leaves. Somewhere not far below, a small dog belonging to a lady-in-waiting, a friend of Lady Shirjimi, barked obnoxiously. The air still carried the dampness of the wet grass, but the midday sun was confidently burning away the remaining moisture. Feeling the heat building unbearably, Naruto lazily took off his jacket, tucking it under his head. The blade of grass he'd been leisurely eating had already wilted. He tossed it aside with a sigh. At first, Uzumaki couldn't understand why Torichan was eating wheatgrass. One of the Shugenin had told him the name, and was constantly bringing it to him. It turned out that cats use it to clean out their stomachs. So Tora tried feeding him some from time to time. The grass was perfectly edible. It just tickled his throat unpleasantly when it got stuck. Rolling onto his side, Naruto stretched luxuriously, arching his back like a cat. The heated roof tiles lightly burned his bare shoulder. Yawning so loudly it felt like his ears were flattened together, he rose and jumped from the roof. After falling 2 stories, the boy flipped in midair, gently grasping the windowsill, pushed off the wall, and landed far onto the lawn, softening his impact with a roll. Walking toward the gate, Naruto spotted Mayoko-chan's dark pigtails through the open kitchen window. Feeling his gaze, the girl turned sharply, her blue eyes flashing. With a mischievous smile creeping onto her face, Mayoko found the bun she prepared that morning and tossed it into Naruto's hands. The boy had overslept for breakfast, and the little cook had made good on her long-standing threat and refused to feed him. The boy didn't steal it, afraid of the hot ladle hitting his blonde head. Gratefully accepting the bun, Naruto thanked the girl with a playful bow and ran on. Lady Shirjimi went shopping, naturally taking Toru with her. Naruto, too tired after intense training and having fallen asleep in the middle of his evening meditation right on the roof, was not awakened, allowing him to catch up on his sleep. Now Uzumaki was determined to find them and continue their walk together. Adjusting the armband with the kanji for fire on his shoulder, almost identical to the one worn by the Shugenin, the boy briskly ran to the shopping district. The bustling streets of the capital always fascinated the child. There were so many people, completely different, some strange, some cheerful, some sullen, some sad. Court dignitaries, poor beggars, honest workers, farmers, merchants. Visitors from other countries and cities were often encountered. Here and there, you could spot street pickpockets, never missing an opportunity to steal someone's money. Naruto always skillfully avoided such characters. Torichan taught him to always be vigilant. A swift-footed rickshaw puller rushed past, carrying a well-groomed, pot-bellied man in a covered cart. Naruto barely managed to jump out of his way. Uzumaki couldn't help but chuckle as he followed him, remembering how he'd bet one of them that he could get his mistress there faster. The rickshaw driver had laughed at him, saying the boy couldn't even move the cart. Oh, how Mistress Shirjimi had laughed delightedly when Naruto, having handed Toru-chan over to her, grabbed the cart's handles and ran with ease. You should have seen the rickshaw driver's stunned expression when an 8-year-old had accomplished the work of a grown man, and with such ostentatious ease. By that time, Uzumaki had already learned to use chakra to strengthen his body. Following the pungent scent of the daimyo's wife's expensive perfume, Naruto found Toru-chan and the lady at the entrance to an expensive jewelry store. "Hello, Auntie. Sorry I didn't come with you right away." The boy ran up to the woman. Naniko was delighted with the arrival of her cub. He was making great progress and could now easily find his way even in the middle of a huge city. "Oh, Naruto-kun, hello. Don't worry, I decided to let you rest. You were very tired yesterday," the mistress said solicitously. She always thought that this child and stubbornness were one and the same. The boy loved to overexert himself during training. "Don't give me any slack, mistress. I'm already a real shinobi," the child protested, frowning comically and stamping his foot, as if to emphasize his point. Tora found it a little funny. The cub remained just as cute as ever, despite his age. "I believe you, dear. But shinobi need to rest sometimes too," she smiled, patting the boy on his striped cheek. "What were you doing here, Auntie?" Naruto quickly changed the subject, sensing that the woman wouldn't stop if he started arguing with her. The lady smiled sadly. "Kunio-kun, just the prince, has a birthday soon, and I still can't find a gift for him." Naruto was surprised to hear that the third prince was celebrating a holiday soon. Kunio was only 2 years older than the blonde, which meant that Uzumaki was often sent to study theoretical subjects with the younger heir. "Perhaps you could help me choose a suitable gift for my boy? You see him often, don't you?" Madame Shirjimi asked hopefully. "Yes, Auntie, I'll help," the boy answered readily. "Tell me what you've already seen." Little Uzumaki was deeply touched by his mistress's concern for her youngest son. She truly loved him and cared about him. Shijimi-san wanted to give her child a nice gift. Listening to his mistress's hurried chatter, Naruto thought about how wonderful it would be to have such a parent. Naruto admired the way Lady Shirjimi cared for her children. She undoubtedly loved them very much. She loved Naruto too, but not in the same way. The boy clearly felt the difference and would have given anything to experience parental love for just one day, to feel loved unconditionally, simply for being who you are. He had the misfortune of losing his parents in infancy. He neither remembered nor knew anything about them. For some reason, the old man, the third, refused to tell him who they were, what they were like, or even what their names were. These webs of mystery terribly angered and offended little Uzumaki. An atmosphere of uncertainty and secrecy always hung around him like a night fog. Toru-chan always tried to support the boy when he was feeling sad. The child sincerely regretted not being able to understand the Naniko language. The cat clearly knew something, but couldn't say it. Recently, Naruto began seeing vague mental images when talking to Toru-chan. Asuma-sen explained that the Inuzuka communicate with their Nin-kin in a similar way. Choosing a gift for Madame Shijimi's son proved difficult. The lady had absolutely no idea what the boy would truly enjoy, so they visited almost every store in the shopping district, but found nothing. Exhausted, Naruto vowed never again to agree to go shopping with a woman who didn't know what she wanted. Stroking Toru, who was now comfortably perched on his shoulders, the boy suggested the lady look at the toys. Children of aristocrats aren't supposed to play like commoners. They need to study, go out, interact with respected people, and maintain a constant presence. It's terribly tiring, Naruto knows. After some thought, the woman agreed. As a result, half an hour later, a servant was hauling a whole bunch of tekuma, stilts, into the palace, and Uzumaki was twirling a wooden kendama handle with a brightly painted ball, showing his mistress how to use it. Having happily scurried until evening, Uzumaki missed training, only to be reminded by a responsible ninja. After bidding farewell to Madame Shirjimi, who was delighted with her purchases, Naruto, accompanied by Tora, ran to the Shugonin training grounds. There was no one there now, so the boy settled comfortably in the middle of the sparring area. In his training, Uzumaki recently stumbled upon the art of Fuinjutsu. initially assuming that such a complex science with its mountain of theoretical material would be incredibly boring and difficult to master. The boy was very surprised when he suddenly became fascinated with drawing seals. Asuma-san only knew the Fuin alphabet and the basics of scroll sealing. He might be able to make an explosion tag, but that was the extent of his Fuin knowledge. But even this was enough for Naruto to learn how to make basic seals. Thora was pleased that the cub was beginning to grasp human knowledge. From the adults' conversations, the cat could tell that what her cub was doing was a very rare and valuable skill. So she encouraged his fascination with these ink-scented pieces of paper in every way possible. Now she laid down in the grass in the sun, watching the movements of her charge's hands. "Hey, Tora-chan," the cub suddenly asked, drawing a thick line with a brush. "Do you remember your parents?" Naniko relaxed, shaking her ear, lazily lifting her muzzle. I wondered what the cub was asking, especially of her and not a human. "Oh right, if you don't want to lie, don't ask." "Meow," she creaked. Cats have it much simpler. "Really? You were taken away as a child?" Naruto was surprised. He understood the ninja's main message. "It's surprising you're not worried about it, Tora-chan. But I'd like to know who my mom and dad were," the child finished quietly, sadly lowering his eyes to the unfinished Fuin, falling silent for a long moment. A drop of black ink smeared across the page, connecting a couple of lines, changing the meaning of what was written. If she could, Thora would certainly have sighed heavily. Human puppies are very emotionally dependent on their adults. She honestly tried to replace them at least partially, but this cub was especially fixated on his parents, even though he tried his best not to show it. The fox spawn was extremely stubborn when it got an idea into his head. The saddened boy continued writing the explosive seal Fuin. Naruto had learned to create explosive tags and often worked himself into a frenzy when casting them. Perhaps that's why the explosive tags he produced were exceptionally powerful. One of them could explode as if an entire pack had exploded. Tora noticed too late that the scribbled paper beneath the cub's hands was silently hissing and smoldering. In terror, the Naniko rushed toward the oblivious child, but missed the target by a single moment. The blast threw her far back, hurling her onto the dusty, trampled grass of the training ground. She suffered no injuries other than a fright, so as soon as she landed, she immediately jumped up and rushed toward the cub. The boy lay unconscious on the ground, his arms spread awkwardly. Tora quickly nuzzled his soot-stained cheek, checking the cub's condition. He didn't look injured. A few scratches and minor burns had long since ceased to be considered serious injuries. So why hadn't he woken up? Tora meowed loudly and plaintively, trying to reach her cub, licking its cheeks and eyes, but the child didn't come to. With an effort, calming herself and stopping the nervous trembling in her paws, Tora patiently examined the child again. If she hadn't noticed it before, now she distinctly felt in her feline gut how the energy within the cub's chakra center gradually heated up, spreading like boiling water throughout its body. The cat winced, baring her long whiskers. The boy's animal scent intensified significantly. That dark something inside her cub was now awake. Thora couldn't help the human puppy, but the cat's heart ached unbearably at the mere thought of the cub being left alone with the nightmare within. Trusting her feline senses, Tora curled up on Naruto's chest, purring loudly, supporting the cub lost within himself. A black fog swirled under the high ceiling, and a warm, yellowish light left its origins a mystery, emanating from everywhere at once, even from that very fog. Naruto blinked in confusion. Where was it? The boy rose from the floor, covered in warm water. Or maybe not water. The liquid was clear and slightly viscous. He wanted to lie in it a little longer. Naruto didn't know where he was, but panic was slowly taking hold. There was something terrifying in these corridors. Remembering Tora-chan's lessons, Uzumaki pulled himself together and stopped resisting his fear, habitually channeling it into curiosity and excitement. Wandering from one turn to the next, Naruto noticed the ceilings growing higher, the walls gradually receding. Suddenly, a steep staircase appeared, leading downwards into the depths. Driven by curiosity, the boy descended it, finding himself in gigantic corridors, as if he himself had suddenly become the size of a mouse. It was much warmer here than above, even hot, as if he were approaching the fiery bowels of the earth, and the water took on an eerie red hue. With a sense of doom, Naruto strode into the passageway from which the Red River flowed. He stopped in fear when the fiery abyss itself breathed into his face. Around the corner lay the largest hall Naruto had ever seen, and as he pondered its size, the walls seemed to lengthen, and the ceiling receded, disappearing into that same black fog. The golden bars of the cage spanning the center of the hall impressed Naruto no less than the moving walls. "Why did you come?" thundered deafeningly in the ringing silence to which Uzumaki had already become accustomed. Naruto jumped in surprise and hissed at the voice, arching his back almost like Thor. Impossibly large, red, bestial eyes glowed from the other side of the bars. The boy winced as a mixture of mocking contempt and a hint of surprise washed over him. "Stupid jailer! How could they seal me in such a tiny thing?" the voice complained, as if asking itself. "Come on, say something human." A red-haired face emerged from the darkness, its snarling maw revealing a mass of sharp teeth. For some reason, Naruto was most drawn to the nose, black and shiny. "Who are you?" the boy blurted out. His question, against the roar of the beast's words, sounded like the squeak of a mosquito. Deciding to give himself a little credibility in the eyes of the strange creature, Naruto, just in case, adopted a mask of extreme confidence and seriousness. Tora showed that beasts primarily respect strength. "What do you think?" the enormous fox growled. Long red ears and part of the scruff of his neck were revealed, along with his muzzle. Paws resembling human hands splashed softly into the water right by the bars. You're definitely not a simple beast," Naruto said hesitantly, despite all his efforts. His voice trembled under the thickening hot pressure in the air, pressing the boy to the floor. "I've been shown books about animals mutated by natural chakra, but you don't look like those monsters in the pictures." "Ha, monsters? What human? In your understanding, anyone who breaks the usual boundaries established by you humans turns into monsters? And you hate me for the same reason," the fox hissed contemptuously, as if spitting venom. Naruto shook his head vigorously. That wasn't what he meant at all. "You don't have to justify yourself, flee. You're human, which already doesn't reflect well on you," the fox snorted. Tiredly, Uzumaki thought. He himself sighed, like that whenever he was driven away from their stalls by the pot-bellied merchants, their small eyes blazing with anger and fear in their oily red faces. Or when children refused to let him into their company, calling him names every time. Naruto suddenly realized the fox had accused him of tactlessness and lack of sensitivity. Those very qualities Uzumaki himself particularly disliked in people were what he found unpleasant. But he hadn't noticed it right away, swallowed the unfair accusation, and even began to apologize. Throwing aside his momentary resentment, the boy latched onto the ambiguous phrase spoken by the fox. "Not all people are bad, Databeo. And even if in the eyes of others you appear to be a monster, a demon to be hated, there will definitely be those who will accept you for who you are," Naruto retorted heatedly, remembering Toru-chan, Andy Shirjimi, Asuma-san, Old Man Tucci, his daughter Ayam, Mayoko-chan, and many others he had met. They treated him well and always cared for him, even if others whispered the hateful word demon behind his back. The fox, intrigued, pressed his muzzle close to the bars. Uzumaki saw a look of disdain in his bloodshot eyes, the way an adult looks at a foolish child when the child babbles something childishly naive with a serious expression. "Answer me, boy. How do people most often react to monsters?" he suddenly asked, lowering the growl in his voice, making it sound mysterious, echoing off the walls that had moved closer again. Naruto couldn't stop listening to the creature's speech, even though he knew in his mind how strange and abnormal what was happening to him was. Swallowing his thick saliva, Uzumaki answered firmly. They are afraid of monsters. That's right, little one, they're afraid. Now imagine that the monster also has a bunch of corpses on its conscience. Then, hatred and fear are inevitably accompanied by a desire for revenge. Naruto listened to the fox, mesmerized. Only Torichan could capture his undivided attention in the same way. The boy understood that the creature was speaking the truth it had managed to discover and understand throughout its endless life. The fox openly identified itself as the monster. Naruto's insides boiled over, and with such conviction that he was right, he shouted so loudly that he frightened himself. But you are not a monster, and you are not a beast. Think about what you say, flee. The fox raged, crushing me with a nightmarish thirst for blood. I have earned my title. What? The boy screamed at the top of his lungs, throwing aside common sense and self-preservation, bending ever more tightly under the pressure. Although, in truth, he wanted to curl up into a ball in fear and whine shamefully. I killed, I destroyed, I existed. The fox roared in response. The fur on the back of his neck stood on end, and his eyes gleamed with an evil fire. Naruto, who had retreated, trembling from the fox's crushing force, felt a pleasant, comforting warmth on his chest, as if Tora were curled up against him. The memory of his furry friend pulled him out of the whirlpool of indecision and fear. Naruto was surprised at how much he'd been oblivious to. Now he could do everything and decide for himself, even if Tora disappeared from his life as suddenly as she had appeared. And now he would tell that foolish fox everything he thought. Like many other people, shinobi are all about fighting, killing, and dying. That's what happens to anyone with power, Databeo. By the end of his emotional speech, Naruto was out of breath, as if he'd run a marathon. His heart was pounding wildly in his throat. It wasn't clear if it was from fear or from screaming. The fox growled in irritation, but behind the screen of rage, Uzumaki seemed to see a glimmer of, who would have thought it, approval. For some reason, the boy felt a surge of pride in himself, simply because of the fox's dim reflection of positive feelings. Why Naruto suddenly needed the fox's recognition, he himself didn't know, but he clearly felt that it was very important to him. So, you didn't answer who you are? Databeo. Uzumaki remembered where they started. The fox smiled wickedly, anticipating the situation. Hatred boiled within him, demanding release, and here was a small, annoying flea. An unexpectedly effective little thing, but still a bug. Somehow, the prolonged silence of the beast on the other side of the bars made Naruto feel out of place, much more so than when he had first appeared in this strange place. Remember, boy, the fox said firmly, almost commanding him to listen. I and my brothers are intelligent beings created by God-Man. We were born in love, even though we were fragments of true evil. Our name is Biju. The voice gradually grew louder, acquiring a power Naruto had never encountered before. The boy buckled under the weight of the words, but he didn't dare let them pass, burning them into his memory. He was physically crushed, so much so that at one point he stopped breathing. With each word, it became increasingly difficult to be near the fox. It was unbearably scary. 9 parts of one whole, each stronger than the last. I am the strongest of them all, and my name is QB. The darkness beyond the gate suddenly receded, revealing a powerful fox body. Its tails thrashed slowly but restlessly, making it impossible for Naruto to count them. There was no need. The boy had long ago guessed who stood before him. The very same. The demon who had destroyed Konoha 8 years ago. Uzumaki shivered like a leaf in a cold wind. His instincts finally awakened, and for almost the first time, he obeyed them. Unable to bear the pressure of the other's bloodlust any longer, Naruto took off, running on wobbly legs away from the living nightmare. And the enraged fox growled after him. That's right, human, run. We are the children of the cursed tree. Run, run. Don't you dare stay here, or you'll become like... Running deeper into the labyrinth of flooded corridors, Naruto wished with all his heart that he could be as far away as possible. His wish came true suddenly. He simply blinked and saw the night sky instead of endless gray-green walls. He blinked again, and Tora's worried face appeared before his eyes. The cat had lain protectively on him the entire time he'd been unconscious. Tora-chan, what happened to Bayo? The boy asked, propping himself up on his elbows. A tingling sensation lingered in his head as the ominous echo of Lisa's voice turned into an incessant whisper of thousands of voices. Naniko purred with relief, snuggling her warm side against the cub's chest. He was back safe and sound. She pushed a vague thought image into her charge's head. So I made a mistake in the Fuin formula, that's why she exploded. The boy smiled flippantly, for which he earned a painful bite and a blow with a paw. Sorry, Tora-chan. Next time I'll be more careful, he apologized, awkwardly rubbing his bitten hand. Naruto incongruously recalled the Kyuubi and the place where he met the fox. Back then, the boy had been too surprised and confused, but now, with Tora soothing her nearby, the jumble of impressions became clearer, leaving him with less than delightful initial conclusions. You know, Tora-chan, while I was sleeping, I went inside myself, the boy said, stroking his brown fur as if in a trance. The cat looked up at him with wary amber eyes. Her cub wanted to tell me something very important. That's where I met the Kyuubi. It's the bijou that destroyed the leaf on the day I was born. What was it doing in my mind? Especially locked away. The boy continued to look at the faded stars, his head raised high, immersed in his sad thoughts. Now I understand why so many of Konoha's residents avoided me. They all knew who was contained within me, but no one told me. The child's quiet voice was too calm. It seemed he was in severe shock. The boy understood that what he had learned today could not be told to anyone. Naruto knows that they know, but they don't know that he knows. So let it remain that way until Uzumaki figures everything out. Tora was well aware of the dormant essence within her charge, but she wasn't afraid. She merely thought that in addition to the usual lessons, she would now be adding lessons on interacting with the Kyuubi. But Tora-chan was an intelligent ninja and a wonderful cat. She wouldn't let anyone harm her cub, even if he was a human with a fox demon inside. The sun had risen, mercilessly beating down on the half-empty streets of Konoha and the throng of people rushing about. Yamanaka Atama had already cursed the mission he'd been given today, which had seemed so easy at first glance. All they had to do was find a respected lady's missing cat. But this hellish creature turned out to be vengeful, possessed unimaginable abilities bordering on those of a standard chunin, and seemed to possess the ability to clone itself. Because Atama couldn't explain any other way to explain why the brown cat, who had just escaped from him, was now exiting the ramen shop with a satisfied, well-fed face. Yamanaka felt like if he were an Uchiha, the Tomo would have been ripped open. Apparently sensing something with her feline intuition, the cat glanced briefly at the enraged Atama and ran in the opposite direction. "Stop, monster!" he yelled, rushing after her. Along the way, he collided with passers-by several times, knocking them down, twisted his ankle on yet another turn, and broke a gate in someone's fence. This was the most difficult and exhausting mission he could remember. Having escaped her pursuers, Tora sat on the edge of the awning stretched over the stall, listening with solemn concern to what was happening below. The market traders were once again discussing the latest gossip, vilifying what they considered presumptuous clan upstarts, even though a moment ago they had been smilingly selling their wares to them. Thora snorted contemptuously. You'd have to look hard to find such two-faced people. She could clearly see how they addressed her mistress with mocking, false cooing when she bestowed fleeting attention on them, and how they almost growled at her precious cub. Listening to their conversations, it felt like you were about to stumble into something disgusting and pathetically tragic. The Naniko's drowsy state is interrupted by a pair of genin tangled together, rolling out into the middle of the street. A perfect replica of herself runs, nimbly leaping over their prostrate bodies. A wave of pride for the cub rises in the cat's chest. He's already playing so well with the Jinin, managing to maintain a flawless hinge. Naruto, using his transformation technique, runs to the corner, hiding from the shinobi. Only he can find his furry friend whenever he wants. Tora jumps down to him in a narrow alley, switching with her charge. Now the Jinin run after her while Uzumaki rests.
Hee hee, did you see how I did them?
Naruto laughed, addressing his inner interlocutor.
Yes, I saw it. Yamanaka got hit especially hard. Too bad it wasn't fatal.
The growling bass voice responded, without much enthusiasm, more like a sarcasm out of habit.
Oh, come on, Q. You keep going on and on about your murders. As if this is the last time we'll have this much fun.
The boy chuckled, just as usual.
How many times have I told you not to call me that? I am the nine-tailed demon fox.
Kyubi growled irritably. This could have frightened anyone, but this fair-haired Uzumaki had some mystical immunity to intimidation and rudeness. He had grown accustomed to the Nine-Tails ki too quickly, and words never deterred him for long. His definition of scary had sunk to somewhere around the level of
mortal danger? Who cares?
So, after just a month of interaction, Naruto skillfully coaxed the Kyubi into a normal conversation, devoid of rudeness, bloodlust, and attempts to kill. The boy may be simple-minded in appearance and open-hearted, but despite this, he's not short on brains. His intelligence is deep-seated. Now they occasionally converse, sometimes even on serious topics. That's how Naruto learned that the fox, it turns out, hadn't decided to attack Konoha on his own. He was forced to. And that there had been Jinchuriki before him, he was the third. And the Rakuto Sannin was a man, not a god, as everyone believed. However, for some reason, the fox didn't want to talk about the boy's parents, studiously avoiding such topics.
Oh, it's taking too long to call you by your full name,
the child said indignantly, and suddenly, as if remembering something, he perked up.
Hey, Q, do you think we should lead the pursuers to the river, or have they had enough for today?
Tora-chan was very helpful to the boy and his bodymate. Despite their completely different natures, the cat and the demon fox shared similar habits. For example, Kyubi, like the ninja, liked to sleep during the day and stay awake at night. Kyubi's ears also moved depending on his mood, and his whiskers would comically stretch forward when he was angry. And Naruto was absolutely certain the fox also enjoyed being scratched behind the ears. But he hadn't had a chance to test this yet.
Be kind enough to drown someone and don't disturb my sleep. Ah-ha-ha. Yes, you're right. We need to get revenge on them for insulting Tora-chan.
The boy turned into a cat again and trotted proudly in the direction from which he smelled the Naniko. Tora confidently fled from the genin, weaving through the tall bushes of the Central Park. Suddenly, the ninja was caught in the strong arms of one of the boys.
Got you, you wretch.
The boy rejoiced, but immediately received a sharp claw on the crook of his elbow. He dropped the cat, which instantly seized the opportunity, leaping onto the gazebo roof. The stricken genin raised his head and was stunned. Two identical cats, their amber eyes narrowed at him, grinning feline grins. He stood there, unable to move, his mouth opening and closing, until the hellish creatures suddenly vanished in a cloud of white smoke. Naruto and Tora ran through the streets toward the hotel. They were in a fantastic mood. The relaxed boy ran closer to his furry friend, nuzzling her neck with his forehead. He knew Tora-chan really enjoyed it when he did that. Naruto playfully nudged her side and ran a little ahead, suggesting they play a little more tag. The cat was happy to oblige her cub. Suddenly, the cats were grabbed by the scruff of the neck. Naruto struggled with all his might, trying to claw at the insolent creature, until he realized it was Irika-sensei holding them. A very angry Irika-sensei. Naruto, you're not in class again. He shook the animals and demanded in a menacing voice, come on, admit which cat you are. Uzumaki chuckled to himself. Irika-sensei might have learned to catch him and Tora-chan, but he still couldn't identify the real Naruto. Hinge was mastered to the highest level. Not all A and B could handle the mischievous boy's disguise.
Look, Uzumaki! If you don't confess, I'll take you both to the academy like this,
the teacher threatened. Naruto grimaced. Arika wasn't kidding. He'd even drag him in as a cat if only Uzumaki would listen to his boring lectures. Databeo. Naruto already knew how to put into practice what Sensei taught in theory. A cloud of chakra smoke flared in Yumino's right hand. Within a second, the wind dispersed it, and now the teacher's fingers were clutching not brown wool, but the bright orange collar of his jacket.
You win, Arika-sensei,
the boy grumbled, obediently allowing himself to be transported to class, hanging like a disgruntled rag on the sensei's shoulder. Tora was graciously released. The cat made a serious face. Let the cub sit under the supervision of the senior instructors while she finished with the incompetent team of Jinin. After the training, she would definitely pick him up from the place where the humans train the young. Uzumaki's classmates gave him extremely curious glances when he made his unusual appearance at the academy. The blonde rarely showed up for classes, so he remained a dark horse for the students, constantly attracting their attention. Yumino had already begun his lecture, and Naruto was trying very hard to at least pretend to listen. For some reason, everyone felt incredibly sleepy when Arika began tediously retelling the textbook. The mood of the class was obvious. Some nodded off, others pretended to actually listen, and a few, quite unabashedly, slept. Having settled more comfortably in his chair, and using some papers on the table as a pillow, Naruto dozed off, completely ignoring the chalk in Arika's hand that had snapped in anger. He slept in fits and starts. There was a constant humming in his ear, rattling, chomping, and painfully flinging of chalk. But he still wanted to sleep more, and all the inconveniences either corrected themselves or went unnoticed. Uzumaki didn't know how long he slept here, but he was awakened by a loud cry that flew right into his ear. "Get up, Uzumaki! You can't sleep here!" The sudden awakening made Naruto jump up abruptly and slam his head into something hard and movable. It flew off sharply and seemed to scream, but the ringing in his ears and the pain from the blow prevented Naruto from understanding anything. When he finally woke up, he saw that this unknown entity was Kiba. Kiba was sitting on the floor behind him, yelling all sorts of curses, which reminded Naruto very much of the rude Kidna.
"Why are you yelling like that?"
Naruto asked, a little surprised, rubbing his bruised head.
"My heart almost jumped out of my chest, Databeo. Why are you jumping up so suddenly?"
Kiba howled, holding his chin. It seemed like tears had even come to his eyes from the pain. "There's no need to scare us like that, Tibeo," they snorted in response.
"I didn't scare you. I woke you up,"
Inizuka denied, although he really did want to scare you, so to speak, to catch you off guard. This whole conversation took place in raised tones amidst the wild laughter of classmates. "Loser," Ino sang, wiping away the tears that had appeared from laughter. "Kiba, it's your own fault."
"That's no reason to jump up like that."
The dog owner was indignant.
"Everyone has their own reaction,"
Shikamaru interjected in a bored tone. He remembered vividly how he'd hidden all his kunai under his pillow for a while. It was a good thing he only kept one there now, and the rest were in his nightstand. Naruto silently watched his classmates. It seemed he'd slept through the entire lesson. Kiba picked on him again, but Naruto had no desire to scold him, so he used a surefire trick he'd borrowed from the Kyuubi. He grabbed a tiny bit of fox chakra and directed it into his eyes. Red, bloodthirsty eyes stared at Inizuka, causing the boy to forget all his complaints and quietly retreat to his seat. Arika, cheerful as ever, walked into the office with an unexpected ring. The future shinobi immediately scattered to their places and fell silent. Discipline. Naruto brushed the papers off the table and glanced quickly at Kiba. The dog lover fidgeted and pretended to write. But he still saw, he could feel, the way Uzumaki looked at him, the way he was now smiling. Suddenly, Kiba felt a light rustling sound. The paper hit his head and fell onto the table in front of him. Inuzuka unfolded it and read.
Are you stupid?
Indignant, he sent a reply.
Why?
The reply came back.
Because?
The dog owner was about to toss another paper when he was suddenly interrupted by Sakura's irritated, hissing voice. Maybe you should stop throwing notes through me? She seemed tired of watching papers fly across her desk and decided to stop this outrage. While Kiba merely looked at Haruno with displeasure and remained proudly silent, Naruto, looking at him excitedly, nodded in agreement and said something that instantly changed the subject. Really? Ino, stop littering. Then you'll be sending Sasuke love notes. They attracted the attention of the entire class, especially the teacher. What? Yamanaka, caught off guard, said dramatically indignantly, hiding some colored cardboard, so reminiscent of a postcard, back in her sleeve. But you were the one corresponding with Kiba. I definitely saw it. Don't make excuses, Ino. Naruto shook his head, looking the girl straight in the eyes. How can you argue with someone who operates on the principle of not caught, not a thief?
How could I correspond with him if I don't even have a pen?
He removed his hands, showing that there were only papers on the table, as if to prove he was right. And indeed, the blonde man didn't have a pen or pencil. Yamanaka wasn't convinced. She wanted to continue defending her position, but Naruto's demeanor made it clear he couldn't be reasoned with. And Yumino was tired of listening to irrelevant conversations. Yamanaka turned away and pretended to be offended.
Oh, come on!
Naruto continued, now in a whisper. At first, he tried not to smile and tried his best to restrain his lips, which were stretching involuntarily, but he couldn't help it and, exhaling loudly, grinned from ear to ear. Ino smiled too.
They carry water on the offended. Well, here, do you want some candy?
He fished a yellow lollipop, wrapped in a pretty package, out of his pocket.
What is this?
The girl asked in surprise. She's not a child. Why feed her candy?
What do you mean?
The boy responded in surprise. Candy. Don't be afraid, take it. I made it myself. Uzumaki wasn't lying. He'd made this lollipop himself, about 2 days ago, and kept it in his jacket the whole time. True, he'd made it for himself, but oh well, that's not important.
Oh, since you made it with your own hands, I think I'll take this sweet.
Yamanaka was deeply touched. This was the first time she'd met a boy who could cook. Naruto would never tell anyone how hard it was for him to learn how to make these candies. It all stemmed from his desire to give Lady Shirjimi something special for Women's Day. At first, he produced something worthy of the title of a fast-acting lethal poison, but then Mayoko-chan began to refine it day and night until the result satisfied the young chef. Now Naruto can rightfully be proud of himself, because his efforts paid off. Lady Shirjimi was very touched by the gift.
Shikamaru, I'm hungry,
Chuji whined, seeing the sweets in Ino's hands. His chips had run out at the wrong time.
It's almost break time,
Nara muttered sleepily, without lifting his head from his desk.
Chuji,
Uzumaki called quietly, taking another candy out of his pocket.
If you want, I have another one. Really? Thank you, Naruto.
Akimichi exclaimed joyfully, accepting the unexpected gift. Seeing such a passionate reaction to a seemingly insignificant gift, the blonde smiled. He was pleased. No longer able to contain his happy smile, the boy turned to the window. He was ready to laugh with delight. After the main lessons, the students were taken to the academy's training ground. With excited anticipation, the students began practicing their strikes. After the warm-up, practice fights would be held.
Okay, everyone here. The first pair is Shikamaru Nara against Aburame Shino. Yamanaka, Ino, and Chuji Akimichi are ready,
Mizuki-sensei shouted, noting something on his clipboard. Iruka, meanwhile, was marking out the court. Naruto was extremely excited at the chance to test his strength against his peers. Asuma-san and the other Shugenin constantly crushed him when he asked them to train him. It's difficult to determine one's level in such conditions. When Uzumaki was called, He was ready to jump for joy, but he held back. Tori-chan always held herself with dignity and rarely fooled around, and Naruto had long since learned to follow her example. Q never fooled around either, and sometimes he talked about such complex topics that the boy barely understood him, but mostly he grew irritated and growled. Naruto was matched against Kiba, causing the dog lover to grin in anticipation. He still remembered his promise to show who was stronger. After the referee's signal, Inuzuka immediately lunged forward, aiming for his opponent's stomach. Naruto abruptly dodged, missing